Before I begin, I feel it is necessary to point out that the news arm of the BBC has yet to retract, apologize, or otherwise address the deeply transphobic reporting it has engaged in the last few months. In a pinned comment down below, you'll find my original video on the topic, several videos from the YouTuber Sean, who has been ongoing in his pursuit of trying to get the BBC to own up to what they have done, and also a video from Laura Kate Dale showing the protests that have taken place outside of the BBC offices. While I don't feel any of the people behind Doctor Who are in any way responsible for this, I cannot in good conscience talk about a BBC-owned property without mentioning this first, until such time as it is properly redressed. Thank you.
The doctor at a medical facility. This always goes well. Hey there, folks. We are now up to the Tsuranga Conundrum. Man, this episode's weird. Not in like a very interesting way. Not like in a bizarre, ooh, strange, new ideas way, but just in a, how'd this end up like this kind of way? And like, here's the thing. Tsuranga Conundrum is a very maligned episode. And I'm not going to say wrongly, but honestly, it's a little too dull for me to get worked up about. That's not to say I won't get worked up over the course of talking about it. I might. I'm me. But at the same time, like, ultimately, the things that are wrong with it are very pedestrian problems. They're uninteresting problems. As much as I loathe something like Hellbent, its problems are interesting to talk about because they're pretty unique problems. Something like this, it's just an undercooked script. There really isn't anything at the fundamental core of the story as a whole or any of the main concepts at play that would never have worked. Or like, why would you do that? It's more a case of, okay, I get what you're going for, but this just isn't clicking. It just feels like a failure of polish. It feels like a script that desperately needed at least one more cleanup pass. And like, here's the thing. I'm finding myself thinking more and more every time I see one of these episodes, especially the ones that Chibnall himself scripted. I'm finding myself really dwelling on the writing. Because, as I've noted elsewhere, show looks good. Most of the performances are good. None of the performances in this episode are bad. Some of them are really good, actually. I'll even highlight some of that. But the writing is where things just are falling down. And this is another one that feels like bullet point writing. I can see how this as a script outline could result in a good episode. In terms of Doctor and companions on a medical ship with minimal crew, largely automated, problem happens on board. There are other people on board as well, but they're all patients having their own issues. So you've got to deal with that at the same time as dealing with whatever is the actual threat to the ship. You're on a ticking clock because if it is believed by the place you are going to that the ship is somehow contaminated and is a danger to be let on board, they're going to blow the ship up. Like these as a series of bullet points, as an episode outline, rough script, where you're not actually laying out every scene, but just saying, okay, this scene, this happens. This scene, somebody says something that amounts to this. This probably had a really solid outline. But the final product is very little more than just that outline and those bullet points. Again, with characters just doing whatever the bare minimum is for them to fulfill whatever the outline said happened in this scene, and then we move on. Again, there's a couple of exceptions to that, some even good exceptions, but that's just the general vibe I get coming off this. And again, I'm feeling like certain things were reverse engineered by story necessity. The Petang, the alien, feels like a really good example of that. First of all, the Petang really, I mean, okay, look, the name, I don't want to harp on this too much, but Chibnall really sucks at coming up with alien names. It's going to come up again across this series especially. But like, you're really going to name something that is threatening the entire ship after what sounds like an onomatopoeia sound effect from a comic book of a bullet ricocheting off a metal plate. Petang! That's what we're calling this. Okay. I remember my first review sort of harping on the fact that, like, the musical buildup and the visual framing of this thing doesn't match how cute it is. And, like, that's not inherently a problem. You could play off the fact that it is cute despite the fact that it is dangerous, but nothing in the script actually plays off that. I tried to look up to see if I could find, like, early concept drawings, see if it was always supposed to be this cute. But I didn't have a lot of luck finding that, or at least anything that I could be certain was, in fact, legit and not like somebody's fan art that they claimed was concept art. So I don't know if this is the case, but it feels like earlier conception during, say, the shooting period of it was to have it not be this cute, because nothing about the shooting, the music, or the character reactions plays off the fact that it's cute. And again, in and of itself, the fact that it looks cute is not a problem. It's a really weird thing to have completely unacknowledged given the way it behaves and how it functions in the story. It's odd. And it's another thing that just seems somewhat undercooked. And it would make more sense to me if the creature was either redesigned or the design was fully locked down in post-production while they were doing the effects work, and it became cuter than anybody else involved at any point in the shoot expected it to be, but at that point it was too late to reshoot everything. Maybe it's an offshoot of how small it is. Like, they definitely knew it was going to be this small. You can tell that from the shooting and the eye line angles and everything else. So maybe in the creation of it, they thought, well, if it's going to be this small, we can't really make it scary. Let's just lean into being cute. I'm speculating too much about this, though. It just, like, I don't like the Petang. I don't think it works very well. And so some of the interaction, I'm just kind of going to work through this thing at this point. The opening, is not great. The cold open on the junk planet, which I had completely forgotten was a thing, it's not good. Not so much that it's bad in and of itself. The general idea of the doctor and the companions, just looking for parts in a scrapyard, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. What the problem is in context to how few adventures they've had so far and the kind of stuff that keeps happening. What I mean by that is they come across a sonic mine. In other words, the doctor carelessly put them in danger and then failed to get them out of it because the mine goes off and they are coincidentally, miraculously saved by a passing medical vessel. This is the exact same solution that happened when they were floating in space at the end of the very first episode. The doctor screwed up, put them in danger by being reckless and careless, but then miraculously they're just saved from that situation, which means nobody ever confronts the doctor with the fact that she's putting them in this kind of danger. Because here's the thing. It's okay if this doctor is reckless and is making mistakes and screwing up, but you have to actually do something with that fact. What's happening instead is she's just making really stupid errors in judgment and doing things that should get not only her, but these 3 other people killed, and then just miraculously doesn't. And so she doesn't learn. She doesn't change. Nobody brings it up. Nobody addresses it. Nobody confronts her with this. And that's where it becomes a problem. It's okay if the doctor is not perfect. The doctor, honestly, shouldn't be perfect. But the ways in which the doctor is imperfect should factor into things. And having it result in situations that just they get miraculously saved from, and that just happens to put them in the next adventure scenario is really, really lazy. That's lazy. That's such lazy writing. It just is. I'm sorry. I don't like to call other writers lazy because writing is hard. It's really hard. I know that. But come on. Now, that having been said, once we get past that cold open, the first 15 minutes of this episode are actually really solid. Like, there's that cold open hiccup, and there's like a weird quirk that, like, I'm realizing now going back, because I've seen more than a few people, and I'm going to keep an eye on this, catch the fact that, and I even noticed this myself a bit in Rosa, that whenever the doctor runs into a historical figure, she basically just word vomits out their Wikipedia entry, like the major points and what's important about them. What's kind of interesting is she does it here too, with a fictional future space general.
You're mentioned in the Book of Celebrants. You helped defeat the army of the Eons at the back of the Underkind.
I'm not going to say that makes it okay that she does that. It's still awkwardly delivered, crowbarred in exposition. But there is a consistency to it. She does it with people who aren't real too, so for whatever that's worth. But like, again, I know I'm complaining, but honestly, the first 15 minutes are solid. We meet all the various characters involved. We meet Astos, the other doctor. We meet the medical assistant. We meet the general's android assistant, her brother, the guy who's pregnant. And all of these introductions are mostly well-handled. They're either well-handled or they're tolerable. And it's done on the move. We establish the problem. We establish that the TARDIS is left behind. We don't have the TARDIS. Something starts going wrong on the ship. There's something on board. What do we do? First 15 minutes, right up until Astos gets blasted into space, at which point pretty much everything starts to go downhill. Not like an immediate nosedive, but that should have been an early warning because Astos has some of the best interactions with the Doctor, just as banter, but also as like moments for her, characterizing her. Because there's a great exchange between the two of them where she calls him out as being a bad liar.
Oh, bad liar must be difficult in your job.
Hey, I'm an excellent liar.
So you were lying then?
I didn't say that.
See? Bad liar.
And it's a wonderful, fast-paced, rapid shot exchange that shows, again, a bit like she did with Yaz in the very first episode, reading him, getting a beat on him, and just kind of nailing down what his deal is and how at least a certain part of his personality functions and nailing it really quickly and really well. And that's a good bit. I also appreciate that he is the one person calling out the Doctor on stuff because she wants to try and U-turn the ship, take it back, and to get to the TARDIS because she's afraid it'll be stolen, which that's a legit fear. But Astos points out to her like,
you're being hostile and selfish. There are patients on board and need to get to Mrs. Swan as a matter of urgency. My job is to keep all of you safe. You're stopping me from doing that.
He is right to call her out on that. But again, it feels super telling that the one and only character who's calling the Doctor out on stuff she should legitimately be called out for is ejected from space, and nobody else is going to call the Doctor on anything. Definitely not in this episode, at least. But his dynamic was really good, and I wish the dynamic he had with her, any of the three companions had with her. I wish any of the three of them would confront her when she's pulling BS. Because this is kind of what I meant when I said it would have been okay if the Doctor was making mistakes that got them all in danger, and as long as somebody is addressing that and the characters aren't just letting it slide and it never goes anywhere. A scene like this where Astos says, you are being selfish, you need to get a grip, is something that I needed. Now, if people really want to be super cool, it'd be like, oh yeah, a man has to talk her down. There's no true vibe of that in this scene. Somebody needed to call her out for what she was trying to do. It could have been him. It could have been anybody. It didn't have to be him. It doesn't matter. But the fact that he did was a good scene. And the fact that that is something that does not regularly happen is what makes a lot of the stuff that goes on with the Doctor, with the mistakes she makes and the moral high horse she has a tendency to get on, become a problem, because the show never confronts it. It just does it. And there's so many great little moments. Like there's this wonderful little moment between the two of them where...
I'm the Doctor.
Are you kidding?
Sometimes. But not right now.
That's a great little character response, and it's the kind of stuff I want from her more than we get. Other than that, as we get into the back end, look, the male pregnancy stuff, it's fine. It's cute. It's fine. It's a standard birth. Oh, I wasn't ready for this scene. It's just with a guy. It's like, fine, whatever. I do kind of appreciate how it brings back the issue of with Ryan and his dad and his hangups around that and how it evokes that. They do deliver that in another sort of, hey, how do you feel about what's going on scene, which is a little bit clunky, but once Yaz kind of opens the door for him to talk about that, I did feel that Ryan's explanation and his thoughts on it felt well thought out and legitimate. Setting up him being able to talk about it was a little clunky, but whatever. Oh, coming back to the Petang real quick, this is one of those things, along with 42, actually, which I think was also Chibnall. I think he wrote that. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. If he didn't, I'll cut that observation. But also, like with 42, I found myself asking, do we need a monster? Because I'm not sure we do. Like, we need the scenario. We need the danger of the overall scenario. We need the complications of, what the other people on board are going through. Do we need a literal monster? Because it's not actually adding anything that just the ship, heck, being hit by a meteorite wouldn't have accomplished. And it's potentially actively detracting. So it's one of those moments where the idea of the monster of the week, I think, actually hurts the story. There's another good sort of little conversation. I like when the doctor's sort of giving the medic, the assistant, a little pep talk. I thought that was a decent scene. It was a little odd to me how long it took the doctor to figure out that the Petang was eating energy. Actually, back up. What was really odd about that is they get like this thing, this computer telling them what the Petang is and that it eats all this stuff and it's toxic. And I'm like, I get that it makes the point that, a Petang on board basically means everyone's going to die. But for the amount of information the thing had, like, nobody had pieced together before the doctor that it goes primarily for energy sources and isn't just eating the ship at random, because as she in fact does, she just looks at the pattern of what he's eating in what order, and that's what makes sense what he's doing. So she was the first person to ever figure that out, because I would think that would be vital information to put in the space Wikipedia entry or whatever it was that was read out loud to them. And it's one of those cases where you make her smart by making the rest of the universe dumb, because that really should have been there. And again, it's that reverse engineering feel. It's like, well, she can't figure out how to get rid of the Petang until X point in the script, so we just have to have her figure out this thing, even though that really should have been information that was on the space Wikipedia. I have a hard time believing nobody else noticed that pattern. Again, it's feeling the hands of the author. It's sensing the way in which everything was placed artificially. And the thing is, like, hand of the author is a weird kind of criticism in a way, because if you are attuned to writing in general, or if you do it or try to do it, like, you can become overly noticing of these things. That is true. But the thing is, a well-crafted story should make me not notice this. If I'm noticing this stuff, it's because I'm not properly absorbed by the story. And so I'm noticing these things. That is part of the problem, in addition to the actual issues being as clunky and transparent as they are. So it's a two-pronged problem. It's a problem because of how artificial the scenario feels, and like it feels manipulated by an author and not a natural, organic, evolving situation. And then it's a compound problem because if I'm noticing that, not only is it clunky and out of place, but everything else is failing to distract me from that fact. Like, this is one of the reasons I don't get hung up on plot holes, because a good film, first time watching it through, if you don't notice the plot hole until either second, third, fourth time, or after thinking about it really hard, then the movie did its job. It wrapped you up in the story so that you didn't notice the plot hole while watching it for the first time. That's why I rarely go on about plot holes unless I catch them right off the bat. Now, granted, this is my second viewing, but I still feel like I should not be noticing the machinations of the author to the degree that I am. Couple of other weird random things. The Doctor keeps updating other characters on stuff that, yes, those characters don't know, but the audience already does. And normally you'd cover that gap just with a time jump and just assume the Doctor explained X, Y, and Z to characters. So to have her stop and actually do it when it's something, again, that the audience already knows and has already had explained to us, and then she then explains that again to another character, like, why? Why would you do that? Oh, there's one other line I really like.
Oh, please don't be wrong. I'll be so embarrassed and dead.
That's a good line. I like that line. And I think that's just the thing. I think this feels like an episode that I'd hoped it would have a propellant energy that would just gloss over the issues. But it doesn't. Because the issues are too numerous and the overall construction is too clunky to distract from the problems. But again, it's not something that's flawed in a particularly fascinating way. It's just not polished. It's just one or two drafts shy of being something that should have been put in front of cameras. Tsuranga Conundrum. What do you think about this one? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe, Patreon. It's how I pay the bills around here. It's how we keep the whole operation up and running, and I am able to continue to do this on the schedule that I do it. Any amount you are able to help there is greatly appreciated. Don't worry too much about it, though, if you can't. Because, at the end of the day, what I really want you to remember is you're beautiful, you're valid, and you're loved. You're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And then, until next time, this council is adjourned. End credits. I gotta shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B, Melinda Walters, Leotha Boy, TT, Renobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.